Hello, Mandy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Are we?
I'm going all right. Going all right.
Yeah.
How is your is where you are now? Is that your space where you
Yeah.
do your work?
Yep. So this is my studio, which is in my
Mhm.
house. Um,
It's got a bunker vibe, like as though it's like almost half a sleep out type thing. Is that because of the
yeah.
wooden walls? I think
What's that?
is it like because of the wooden walls? There's like a
Yeah.
camp out vibe to it.
Yeah. The whole house is like plywood. I'm just turning my room now. The whole house is like plywood that's not been painted. So it's kind of like a big tree house, it feels like.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And so this is my studio. It's quite a small room, but it's just big enough, as a cartoonist, I don't need a massive space. I've just got a drawing desk and lots of books and yeah, and a nice view out the window looking down at the trees and
Yeah.
garden. So yeah.
It
And
does look like a lovely little space. It looks like you've got some nice light in there as well, which is
yeah,
key.
very good. Yeah. And yourself, you look like you're in a up high in the city.
I am up high. Yeah, I'm in my fourth floor apartment building. Actually, just got a very poorly timed delivery. And I was like, oh, like literally as we were just about to start this, so I had to run downstairs and get it. And then, of course, it wasn't even for me. So it
What?
was the most
Oh,
disappointing. Yeah, it was for my partner. So
oh, okay.
nothing more disappointing than being told you've got a package, going to get it, and then
Yeah.
finding it's not even your package.
No. At least it was a package for your household and not like some random person and it was just a massive
Yes.
mistake. But you got
Yeah.
to get some exercise running. Do you literally ran down?
I'll be honest, I took the elevator. I,
Okay.
but that was not, it's not because I'm lazy. It's just that I thought it would be quicker so I could be back quicker. So
Yeah, should
that
maybe
was,
test the theory of it's quicker to go in the elevator or run up and down the stairs because it might
yeah,
be quicker to run.
it's definitely quicker if I go down one side. It's only two floors, but four flights is probably a little. I don't think I could run that fast.
Yeah,
But you're right. I haven't tested it, and until I do, we won't know.
yeah.
Um,
Hey, I was doing some background research and I realized that you work in radio. Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
So, yeah, so I tuned in this morning while I ate my breakfast
Oh my gosh.
and listened to a couple of songs. Yeah, it was good. It was
uh,
nice to hear you the other part of your life, and then you've got your, art and comics and graphic design and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I was going to apologize if I'm get a little scattered throughout this chat because uh, I've been up since 4:30, and so by the time it gets to the afternoon, my brain starts kind of dripping out my ears a little bit.
All right. So
Um,
you haven't had a nap.
no,
Oh, nap.
no,
All right.
can't nap. Well, I love napping, but then I can't get to sleep at night, and then I get so like I'll toss and turn and get all angry that I'm not sleeping rather than
Yeah.
trying to sleep.
Yeah.
If that
Well,
makes
I can
sense.
relate because one of my jobs I'm up early too, like 5 o'clock
Mhm.
for quite a few.
Okay,
Yep. And I have done that for years. But I'm a full on hardcore napper. So I
right.
I can nap for half an hour and wake up and I got to remember which if it's the same day or the next day, but then I'm like fully recharged. So
So
yeah.
good. It's important to have what works for you, and also it's important with naps, I think, to time them perfectly for your sleep cycles so that you do them in the right chunks of time, right? So like a 30-minute or a 60 or a 90,
Yep.
so that you must be a pro at that by
Yeah.
now then.
Yeah.
So do you
Yeah.
have you always had a um is it important to you to have other work outside of cartooning, or is it just a fact of life for you?
It's an absolute necessity, just financially, and
Yeah.
also it's also something that I do enjoy having another completely different aspect to my life. I mean, for when I first started doing comics, it was more I'm working these jobs to survive, and one day I'll make a living off comics or illustration or whatever. And over the years, I think I realized that might be tricky depending on the way I wanted to pursue my comics. But with the things that I chose to do other than comics, I've actually ended up really loving what I do. So I just feel like my life is split into a couple of whole different facets. You know, sometimes the comic side, there's no awareness of the, like, you know, people who know my comics probably wouldn't know much about the other side. And then there's the people I work with in the non-comic field that are really surprised when I, you know, tell them I'm a cartoonist. They're like, you know, really surprised. So it's like these two worlds that sometimes they mix, and usually I keep them a bit separate. Yeah, but it's good. It's a good balance actually. And I'm like fully have to be out in the world kind of person and interacting with other people, and in the moment and all that, and all the, you know, all the being in the world and just doing other stuff. It basically feeds most of the stories that I write.
Yeah.
So it works out quite well.
Yeah, I think it is. I find that as well. I find it really useful, particularly if you're getting stuck on something, like as you said. So I go to, I'm 3 days a week at radio, and then the other 4 days a week I have a studio that I go to and do drawing and stuff. And so I find that those breaks are great, and I can just switch half of my brain off for a certain time and then switch it back on, and it kind of keeps you fresh and excited to go back to what the other thing is you're doing, rather than, because I find when I'm just doing one thing, I get too kind of stressed out about it, or that I'm not doing it well enough or something, whereas I can just kind of leave something behind a little bit, which is nice.
And one's sort of like sort of social, and where you're engaging with the world and you're having to also like be spontaneous in the moment. Like I can imagine on radio, that's a massive thing, like having to be on the spot. And
I think, as you said, just being present, like, yeah, that's the most important thing, and that's why it's so tiring as well. Because I'll do like a 4-hour radio show, and I'm never hungrier than as immediately after I get off air, because I just kind of, you're just burning so much, I think, just by being present.
Yes.
And trying to communicate. But yeah, I loved your piece as part of the GDS number 41.
Yeah, likewise. I loved your piece as well, and I just reread it a few times since yesterday. And
I've just been reading. I've just been rereading yours as well. It's funny to keep
short.
it's funny to reread, and that was going to be my first question for you, because I don't know about you, but like, it's interestingly timed now that we're having this chat, now that we're back in lockdown, as we were when we were creating these pieces. So I'm curious, when you look at your piece now, what do you think about it? Do you think like, oh, that's very lockdown too, or are you like, I can't feel like you're in the same headspace almost as you were then?
No, I definitely different. I think, when I created that piece, it was at the very beginning last year of everything locking down. Before we were wearing masks, except there was, in the story, there is one character that is wearing a mask, and it wasn't mandatory at that point, which is good for people to know, because I am an intense like mask wearer. I work with vulnerable people. I work in the public realm, so I'm, really careful. But it's sort of, I think it was written when it was all new, and I was really curious about people's shifting behavior, particularly towards their interactions with each other. And one thing I really love is writing about how strangers interact, and seeing how people were coping, like the idea of it being entrenched that we keep a distance, but then there's this sort of, when you're out there, people wanting to connect. So like keeping a distance but connecting at the same time, and social etiquette, which is a big one. So the story is all about sort of spatial etiquette, and the way people can acknowledge each other out in public and still feel like they're part of the community. and also the contradictions in behavior of like, particularly, things like mask wearing, which is one of my like bear bugs at the moment, in the the how it can be hilarious the way people relate to these objects that are, there to keep us safe, but how they can just not have any idea of how to do it properly or not care.
Well, yeah, I was just talking to my neighbor who had an experience yesterday where she was holding her mask and a pastry that she was eating, and she was walking on a completely like empty street except for this one guy who crossed like deliberately really close to her to tell her to put her mask on,
Yeah.
while she was
Eating.
like eating a pastry. And um it it just immediately like made me think of that, about how we how in a way that sort of hasn't changed, or that how we see certain patterns of like uh, societal patterns, or people that have found a new way to impose themselves on society in a way, like that was a very like, and she said that they've been, it's always men and and she's had that from
Mm,
like, that's not a single one-off experience.
yeah.
And I don't know, that's interesting to me, but also thinking about what you were saying about interactions with strangers, it was also something that I was thinking about just after reading your work, um and how reading your work makes me want to interact with strangers more, because I want that element in my life of a bit of unexpectedness. And actually, I think that influenced the um, literally, I said before that I went downstairs to get a package, and there was another guy also collecting a package down there. And I probably never would usually do this, but we got back in the elevator together, two people, opposite sides of the elevator. And I was like, "What'd you get in your package?" I was like, "Oh, nice package. That looks like something fun." And he was like, "Oh yeah, it's a blender." And then we talked for 30 seconds about how he was going to make chili sauce with his blender, and it was um, a nice moment
Yeah.
of that, and exactly what I think what you're saying of wanting to reach out and wanting to. Do you have you found that you yourself have changed in the way that you react to strangers?
Yeah, well, I like what you just said, because I'm really interested in that idea that there's a sweetness to the the connection with someone that you don't know, and the common ground that you might find with them, and how there's a sort of a nice awkwardness when you're trying to figure someone out, and whether or not they want to interact. And
Yeah.
like my job, I feel awkward in my job and my life a lot. And I have to be very spontaneous in my work, and think on the spot, and just and sort of like have to lean into the discomfort of being feeling awkward. And that's basically my normal most of the time. So I kind of revel in, that with other people, and I get a lot of joy from that. The unknown sort of possibility of interacting with a fellow person. And sometimes, even if it's a really kind of shitty interaction, it's even walking away, it can be kind of fascinating to look back on it as well. So it's not always even the positive ones. It's just, it can be anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, I think there's this feeling of, it's hard for so many people. Like, I feel really lucky I can still go out into the world and work and travel, and because of I'm working essential services. So I've got this pattern, whereas I feel like when I do interact with other people, I don't know, people are going through a lot of stuff. People are doing it tough and finding ways to cope, and people want to talk as well. I have a lot of conversations with strangers, so um, it's I think, yeah, I'm just really curious, probably more so now, about how people are coping, and also like people, you know, going through some hard stuff, but really there's always like a bit of a sense of humor attached. I think, I don't know if it's just the community, if it's culturally or what it is, but this ability to kind of find the joke or find the funny situation in a kind of a shitty situation or whatever. It's good. Sort of like there's this underlying feeling of people wanting to feel good, and finding the
Yeah.
humor to feel good.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, I was when we were talking about my radio show earlier, and that is something that I don't think it's changed, but like particularly in the last few weeks, like I have made an effort to, for no reason other than to connect, to say, um, I've every morning I've talked to a different person and just got to know them,
Yeah.
And it's been so much fun, as you were saying before, having those interactions with a stranger. And sometimes it's awful, like in sometimes in terms of like we are not speaking the same language, but we're both trying to connect in a weird way. And the um there's something about just purely being a presence, being a happy presence on the other side of the radio, that people reach out to you, and it's I think it's fuel, and it goes both ways as well.
Yeah.
But we kind of I feel like you've talked around it a bit. Are you comfortable saying what it is that you what it is that you do outside of
Oh yeah.
cartooning?
So I'm a disability support worker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also work in like an organic, like a greengrocers sometimes.
Cool.
Yeah. So just engaging with people and out in public.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to do the same thing I've always done, but just in this kind of climate that we're in. So yeah,
Yeah.
noticing, yeah, the difference. Um, yeah. And I wanted to
Mm.
ask you a similar question about your piece, when you wrote your piece,
Mm.
and did the, you know, the time that you write it in influence the way you were thinking about, when you saw the flag, and it inspired this whole like beautiful story about flags and what they mean and what they mean to you?
Yeah, I was I think that uh undoubtedly it did, somehow drew my attention to it, maybe in a different way. I think this particular flag that I saw, I was passing it, certainly just even on a very basic level, I was passing it because I was taking a route that I didn't used to take before the pandemic. So it came into my world in that way.
Was there any
And
reason why you were taking a different route? Because like, was it?
I would usually catch a tram, and at that time I wasn't catching trams anymore, so I was walking. Yeah, I was walking. Yeah, yeah. And so I think that's part of it as well. Like walking, I love walking, and I think it's some of the a few years ago I made a rule for myself when I'm walking, it's headphones out, no headphones while walking,
Okay.
because sometimes it's the best time, even if you don't feel like it. Sometimes I just found it as an important processing time. And I used to walk a lot more, and then when I moved into the city, things became a bit more of an awkward distance away. So like what used to be a beautiful 45-minute walk became an hour and a half walk, and that was just like too much to do every day, to go an hour and a half to get to where to work, and it just became like kind of an awkward distance, and I stopped doing it. But then I started doing it again, and so it afforded me a lot of time to think, I suppose. I think the only other way I think also with this piece, I was deliberately, my reaction was at the very beginning of the pandemic, I wrote a comic about that period, and then I kind of felt like I had said all I wanted to say about that at the time. So it was deliberately not specifically pandemic related. But I think it probably, seeped in terms of headspace, in terms of very much looking inwards. So using the flag as a way to, when I knuckled down and burrowed into it, the more and more I got to, oh, it's interesting. I started thinking about this flag, but actually, I'm seeing what I do, like how I relate to people and how I relate to things and how I see things and how that's affecting the world. So that was kind of just burrowing inwards.
When I read your piece, I sort of felt like it was really really emotive. Like there's so much feeling in it, really interesting, and it felt really personal. The way you wrote, really personal, which is obviously my favorite kind of story, like writing, because I really love autobiographical stories. But it was really informative as well. Like there was all these really cool facts or interesting like bites about things like, French ships, putting flags up a couple of times, like 3 kisses, and I didn't even occur to me. I probably was told this years ago that, design a flag like the size of a stamp so it can be seen from far away.
Yeah.
And then the idea that, because I love the city of Melbourne and all the buildings, like I wrote a book years ago called Rooftops, and I was fixated on all the buildings in Melbourne, and I got to draw a whole bunch of them. And I love the idea that there's on all those beautiful, like even the Art Deco kind of buildings, there's the unused flagpoles, which I don't know if I've even noticed that. And I'm going to look next time I'm in the city. We have the luxury of going into the city, but but I was just curious with all of those, because I love that kind of stuff, like interwoven in something that's coming from the heart, because it's just really interesting. And is that things that you already were interested in, that you knew about? Do you do like quite a bit of research sometimes for your stories, just to kind of like, because you're curious yourself about a particular subject that you stumbled upon on your walk?
It's literally so the way it worked was, I was asked to do this, and I was like, oh, great, because I was just thinking about flags and I want to write about them. And so it was like that it was an excuse, and that was the jumping off point to do it. And so I have I think I like design of flags, and I knew a couple of facts, and I think the ones that I started with I had someone tell me, like, because I've got a line in there that's like, one of the only things I knew about flags was this, and one of my friends read it and was like, I like how you say the only thing you know about flags is to draw them the size of a postage stamp, and then you proceed to spend 20 pages telling us all these other things you know about flags. And I was like, well, when I started, all I knew about flags was that you had to draw them postage stamp size, which I just always loved as an idea. And I think in comics too, like it's always so important to do. Do you thumbnail a lot? Do you do many thumbnails?
Very basically, very basic. I tend to just composition, in terms of composition, and just go for it with the ink. But it's like, I don't know if you're going to say, it's like the clarity that is in comics. you know, it's like the idea of from a distance you can recognize something, and it can be strong and meaningful, and you understand symbolically what it's saying instantly. I mean, that's the same as
Exactly.
the visual nature of comics, as
Yeah.
you kind of like, you know, if a reader hesitates on an image, they might be curious about trying to figure it out, but not for long. You need to be pretty clear about what's going on, and mostly because the reader wants to move forward in the story. They're like, you know, keen to be like, you know, it's like there's a momentum that's happening. So you know, the clarity is really important, symbolically. You know, you can put as much detail, obviously, you know, like there's some beautiful detail in your work, but the clarity is just like precision. So
so
well, like the idea of flags and the idea of comics, it's just a really lovely, like the two of them, like you know, talking about flags in comic form, like it's just two things just go so beautifully together.
There's a nice interplay there, and and that was definitely something I thought the kind of, and I thought of making it even more overt at times, and like having panels that were, I mean, there are even some in there that panels that are kind of flag shaped and stuff, but and I thought about playing it up more and having like pages where they're like the panels were all on flag poles and stuff, but I was like, it's obvious, it's in there. And
there was another thing I really loved about your work was because I'm really mad about the idea of using diagrams in comics, like having little boxes and little arrows, and you know, the idea of like trying to communicate an abstract concept visually. So, and you have towards the end of the comic, there's all this amazing sort of almost diagrammatic drawings that remind me of a book I've got about, it's like a comic book about the quantum universe and physics, and trying to visually communicate something that's invisible and abstract. And I find like comics is just such a powerful medium to try and really like conceptualize those sorts of difficult ideas. So
absolutely,
I really enjoyed that aspect as it evolved to going into a whole different kind of realm, showing what, you know, basically showing what comics can do as a visual language, and how sophisticated, you know, they can be with conceptual ideas. I really enjoyed that.
Oh, cool! Thanks. The what's that book? Do you know off the top of your head what it's called?
The Quantum Universe.
The Quantum Universe. Yeah. I've always, I think that comics are uniquely good at conveying the heart of something like that with because as you said, like something about it has to be simple, like it has to read so clearly, it has to that you get something from it, and also it allows the words to kind of take a back seat a little bit to kind of let you feel the emotional truth of something, as kind of paving the way to understanding the intellectual truth or the thing, which I think when done really well can be so good. And
it gives like a space for the reader to like, it's that to be able to like comprehend by contributing their own ideas, in that, like, you know, I guess the whole structure of comics is between panels, and even within the panel, you know, not every single thing is revealed, and you rely on the reader to come with a whole, you know, lifetime of experience and knowledge and emotional range to be able to fill in the gaps. So
I've noticed that in your work, something I really like about your work is that space to bring yourself to it, and your own interpretation to the work, that you kind of do not you don't really rub things in people's faces, like rub a point in. I was wondering, do you have in mind like stuff that you want to say, and like when you do you script it out and kind of be like, this is the point I want to make, and then take it away? Or do you start with this kind of sense of here is just an idea, here is a thought, do with it what you will?
It's kind of a bit of all of it, actually.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll be a moment and I'm like, and I'll question, like, why am I so fixated on this moment that keeps going around and around and around in my head? Maybe I'm telling other people about it, like a little anecdotal story. Perhaps it's enraged me and I've got no outlet, or I feel moved, or, you know, all that kind of stuff, or just entertained, like I'm laughing my stupid ass off at something that I find funny because I have over a 3-year-old most of the time, which I'm very proud of that, but and it's hereditary. It's my dad's fault. I don't have any say in it. but yeah, I just usually it's that thing of like an anecdotal story or a moment will, I guess, unravel to reveal deeper meaning, deeper like universal kind of human experience.
So like the sense I'm getting then is that like you feel if something's playing on your mind or it's going around in your mind, that you trust that there is something juicy there,
yes,
that someone else will also want to chew over.
Yeah, and it's kind of being curious as to like you know, how in control of myself am I inwardly if I get triggered by an experience or something that I've seen. Why has it affected me, and what is it that's like I want to kind of look at it more closely. I want to give myself, put my, like, it's like my own little private therapy session or something in my head, that, and also like make a story out of it. Like, how do I, it's that challenge of taking something that you find particularly interesting, and how do you shape it? How do you turn it? How do you transform it into something that's going to be a story? And also like I always like really strive to enjoy the storytelling process for myself. So sometimes I'll work towards an ending because I know exactly what that last panel is going to be. Right. Or there'll be pivotal moments in the story where I'll have an image of, like, you know, I get really excited about a certain moment in a story, and so sometimes I'll even draw that moment up, even if it's in the middle or right at the end, and I'll have it finished, and then I'll work, like, start from the beginning, or I'll go backwards a little bit. Like, it's not necessarily written in sequential order into like time frame.
Yes, you just know that that's the key, that's the heart of it in a way.
Yeah, and if I can visualize it, then I can kind of construct how to work up to that point. And so sometimes like my scripts are really fairly thorough in that I'll work to a rough kind of a script. But lately it's been I'll kind of do a little section at a time, and by the time I finish that section, I'm probably going to be ready for the next section. But I haven't been able to do the script, the whole thing. It's just I've sat down, I just can't do it. Maybe it's the headspace we're all in. I don't know if it's, you know, everything that's been happening has made it difficult to see things through from beginning to end. But it seems to be working out okay. Yeah. So
I love that. I think everything you said there really spoke to me, and I was so like happy to hear it, because I was like, okay, that's that's also at the core of where how I go about something, or why something interests me. Like, I'm like, oh, this is interesting to me. Why am I fixated on this flag? Like, I'm looking at it and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and yet I don't. Yeah, I'm also, there's a part of me that's cringing away from it, and then it's a weeks of therapy, like figuring that out.
yeah.
And for me that for me reading because I read mine again as well for the first time in months since we did this, and to me I was like, oh, there's more, maybe there's more struggle in this than I would like it's a bit like the struggle is there on the page, which I don't mind, but the you could see that, like, I think I would have liked, if I was to do it again, to just have a through line be a bit clearer.
What do you mean by the struggle? Like, what do you mean by you can see that there's a struggle? In what way?
In just that, in that I was interested by so many different elements of flags that I just got too caught up in thinking about all of the different and there were so many ones that didn't even make it in there, where like I went down this whole rabbit hole of looking at Jolly Rogers of pirate flags, and how each individual every like you know, you think of the Jolly Roger like the skull and crossbones, but actually every pirate, like every pirate of every boat, like who had their own boat, had their own Jolly Roger, and they were all slightly different. And some of them had elements of there were other symbols that were equally as popular as the skull and crossbones, that were like, one of them was a time turner, which has a name, and when I can't think of an hourglass.
Yeah. Oh, an hourglass. Yeah.
Yeah, an hourglass.
I was thinking of one of those like clocks that you do when you're cooking and it goes.
Yeah.
I was like, no, that's modern, so maybe not.
Yeah.
An hourglass. Yeah.
Yeah. I have one of those, by the way. It's shaped like a chicken, and
Hey.
I use it to try to sometimes keep myself on track. But an hourglass to show that time's running out for all of us. Some of them had like bleeding hearts on them, or knives with blood dripping from it. But there were all these other symbols, and that's just an example of like one of the rabbit holes I went down with this. And I think that the piece is like almost a series of these rabbit holes while I'm trying to figure out what it is that interested me about it in the first place.
But that's what's nice about the piece, is that it's like about figuring something out. Like that's what I like about it. And the idea, like you say, you do like open up this whole can of worms of like information and choices, but the way I love the way you address it, with having the idea of like the body, and it's got lots of little flags in it, and a flag for every little occasion, like every little facet of your life. The flag for, I think you have it, I wrote it down, which I loved. The desire to stay in bed for the day. Like there's a flag for that. And there's the flag for, you know, when you feel love for someone, or when you want to avoid someone, or anything, you know, it's
croissants.
Yes, anything. I just thought that was just, really a really lovely idea. And I think that like, like I myself have an interest in flags, which I'm sure everybody does, but in this country particularly, just you know, this sort of the conflict that we feel. Like you see other countries just really like, you know, celebrating their flag, but I think in Australia it's really loaded, and it's really complex, and a lot of us, I personally have a lot of conflict with the flag, and but you know, I watched a video of what's happening in Afghanistan at the moment, and there was a young boy riding his bicycle just, you know, yesterday, with the Afghani flag wrapped around him, and the Taliban stopped him, and they tore it off him, and they assaulted him, you know. And and all he was doing was riding a bicycle down the street, teenage boy, with a flag wrapped around him, you know, because he was obviously showing pride for his country, and it was really intense. And I just think about the people in Australia who, you know, some, you know, that we've seen in the media, who walk around with Australian flags wrapped around them for whole different reasons, and it's just such a fascinating, intense, like subject matter to be addressing, particularly in this country.
And I think that there was for me, the And I did a lot of, that was another rabbit hole I went down. Like I did so much reading on nationalism as just um as kind of where we stand with the role of nationalism as it has been and how it kind of is today, and the current state of play, and that was all wrapped up in my feelings about the flag, and wanting to desperately to remove that from something that I found to be such, like, I find flags themselves so beautiful, yet they are tied, not just the Australian flag, but tied to causes which force us to say you are this or you're not this. And that's what a flag is, right? Because to unite people, you are at the same time saying you are not this. So by waving any flag, you're saying I am this, and if you're with me, you're also this, and if you don't like this flag, you're not with me. And there's so much conflict there, and I think there's other whole pieces to be written about that. And I had to kind of force myself to drag myself away from that a little bit, to focus on focus on the personal, like the really personal element of it. Otherwise it would just be too much, I guess.
It's kind of like, maybe like it'd be nice if the common thread that tied everyone together was the intangible element of why something exists, like, with a flag, the sky, the wind, the wind keeping the flag upright. Maybe we should all like get together and fly kites or something, and like make your own kite, and then the wind, the one thing that's like we need is the sky and the wind to be able to do the same. I don't know, it sounds really daggy probably, but yeah,
no, beautiful.
It's nice to think about things like that.
Yeah.
And that's what we do as creative people. I guess we think, we use our imaginations, we go off on tangents, we think like, completely like what feels like absurd thoughts, and then but they can become the poetic, they can become maybe more profound and deeper, deeper levels of thinking. And yeah
no, it's been I've really enjoyed having this chat with you.
Me too.
And
can I finish? I really wanted to ask this question, one last question.
Okay, yeah.
So is there anything that you've been listening to? I like this because it's on our little sheet of paper. Is there anything you've been listening to or watching lately that you just loved, like just when you're relaxing in your spare time?
Yeah, well, I recently had a, a beautiful moment listening to the ABC Classic. They do like a hottest 100 of every year with like a different theme, and this year was, I think, songs you can't live without or something. And I was listening to that to see what people couldn't live without in terms of classical music. And I was listening to the whole playlist, and I was riding along on my scooter, and I was listening to this playlist, and this song came on. I was like, oh, what's this? It was a really slow intro, and then I just was not expecting it. It burst into Ode to Joy, and I didn't realize that Ode to Joy started really slowly and then just went bang. And and I just burst out crying. I was on my scooter and I just burst out crying, and it was just one of those little beautiful moments that that happen for me quite rarely, where just something in you is triggered by art, and it can be something that is so cheesy in a way, or just like that is but allows you like to touch something that's that's more and kind of indescribable in a feeling.
I've had moments like that. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And you remember those for your whole life. You just you can always go. I can remember them from when I was a teenager. Just the moment. And I remember in the moment thinking, this moment's not going to last. This moment's going to. It's just now. That's it. And,
exactly right.
You can still like think about it, but you can't quite get into the, the real. It's like trying to get back into a dream, and you shut your eyes and you're trying to get back into the feeling of the dream, and you're like, I can't get back.
Can't get back there.
And you can just remember. Yeah.
There's a perfect analogy from within that very song in Ode to Joy, which I've never listened to all the way through.
Yeah.
This is the time, and the whole time in the rest of the song, it's edging you. It's like building you back up. So it starts off this slow bit, and then it goes ba dun 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 dun, and you're just like, whoa. And then that drop dies away, and then there's like 7 minutes where it builds up again, and you think that's coming back, and it never comes back. It never gives you that release that you want, and it can never take you back to that moment of joy at the beginning. So you can't get back to it.
No. It's that pinprick of just a moment that you've got.
Yeah.
It's so nice. So nice.
Have you had, what was the last moment like that you had?
I was just thinking back to, it wasn't the last one, but it was like, I was just thinking back to a moment that where I grew up, it was a close-knit neighborhood, and I was staying at one of my neighbors' houses, and I used to stay there all the time, and she had a trundle bed under her bed, and I used to sleep on that, and she had a really messy room, and there was just clothes everywhere, and I would wake up like surrounded by her messy clothes, this friend of mine. And I remember waking up and it was raining, and I was in a doona in this trundle bed at my neighbor's house, and I was probably about like 13, and I lay there listening to my friend sleeping, and I remember consciously, just very accurately thinking, this is a good moment right now, and then quickly feeling a little bit sad about it, because I knew that I'd get up and go to school and it would be gone. But I do think back to that moment all the time, and I'm still friends with this person. So it was just it was like peace. It was just feeling very of peace. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for sharing your moment. And yeah, so yeah, it was lovely to speak to you, Stacey. Yeah, really
and you.
To speak to you. Yeah.
Hope that we can hang out IRL sometime.
Yeah, that would be really nice. I'd enjoy that. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, and thanks, GDS.